A few days ago, I posted a video comparing the original M1 Mac Mini 16GB, which I currently use, to the new M2 Pro Mac Mini, and ultimately decided that it just wasn't worth the cost when my M1 already does 90% of what I need it to do. Well, me being the flip-flopper that I am and the kind of person who always has to have the newest shiny thing, I put in my order anyway. But now that I've had time to really think about it, I've watched a few YouTube videos and read a few articles, I'm finally convinced that if you're also considering buying the M2 Pro Mac Mini, now is just not the time to upgrade. Let's talk about it. Now, quick disclaimer, I am not a professional Mac reviewer. I'm a regular consumer just like you who's simply looking to get the most out of my dollars. And I happen to have a tech YouTube channel. That said, if you end up finding this video helpful, consider hitting that subscribe button and notification bell to help my small channel grow. Now, before I get into why you should not buy the M2 Pro model, I want to acknowledge that there are in fact some situations where I would recommend it. You might be coming from an old Mac or PC that's way past its prime and is constantly freezing up on you when trying to run too many plugins in your DAW or when video editing in Final Cut or Premiere, and if that's the case, then yes, I'd absolutely recommend the M2, but maybe not the M2 Pro or its most expensive build. Now, keep in mind that I'm currently running the M1 16GB model, and even with that, I have little issue doing light to moderate work in Studio One, Logic, Lightroom, Photoshop, and 4K editing in Premiere. So if you don't already have at least the M1, the build I'm going to recommend that I think is a great deal would be the M2 Mac Mini, which has a 10-core GPU, 2 more cores than my M1, 24GB of RAM, that's 8 more than my 16GB, and the 512 SSD option, which runs at $1199. That's a decent power boost over my M1, and if I'm able to run everything, then this should be more than enough for most people unless you're doing heavy lifting. That said, if you're like me and have the original M1 chip or have a decent computer that gets most of your work done and want a significant upgrade, then you're probably looking at the maxed out M2 Pro model, and that's where we're going to have to hit the brakes. Now, going from an 8-core CPU to a 12-core CPU, an 8-core GPU to a 19-core GPU, 16GB of RAM to 32GB, that all sounds amazing, and on paper, those are all meaningful upgrades that I'd spend my money on. Not to mention I'm going from having 2 Thunderbolt ports to 4 and getting an HDMI 2.1 connection along with it. But that build, when priced out with a 512GB SSD, puts us at a hefty $1,999, and honestly, I'd probably go for the 1TB so I don't have to worry about expansion and be set, putting me at $2,199, and when priced out after taxes, comes out to $2,380. That's quite a chunk of change when the M1 Mac Mini I already have does 90% of my workload without a problem. The gains just don't justify the price. The other issue I found is that since I primarily do 4K video work, the more GPU cores the better, and for the $1,999 price tag, I can instead get the M1 Mac Studio, which will have a 24-core GPU instead of 19, and still come with 32GB of RAM. Now, sure, the M2 Pro chip will be faster than the M1 Max chip, but is it something I'm really going to notice when the original M1 Mac Mini gets me by just fine? Probably not, and I could always upgrade to the M1 Max with a 32-core GPU for more video editing power and match the same $2,380 price I'd pay for the M2 Pro Mac Mini build. With all of that said, at this point, I feel like if I'm going to upgrade, it needs to be a clear and major jump from what I'm using, and when you consider the minimal gains, the fact that I could instead get the Mac Studio, but then I'd have to choose between the newer chip or having more GPU, it's just not the right time, and I need to know that if I'm investing almost $2,500, then I'm at least doubling the performance and future-proofing myself, and I don't feel like I should have to decide between 2 machines. There should be a clear and obvious winner. So at this point in time, unless you need a significant upgrade, if your current computer handles your workload, I'd suggest you do what I'm going to do and not buy the M2 Pro Mac Mini. Instead, wait for the inevitable M2 Max or Ultra Mac Studio, or whatever Apple has in store for us, even if it means waiting for the eventual M3 chips, when there will be no question or doubt on whether we should upgrade or not, because if you're like me, let's be honest, that shiny new toy, we're getting by just fine without it. Now, let me know what you think in the comments below, if you agree with me, and if you're going to wait or if you're going to make the jump. If you have any questions, ask away. I'm sure if I'm unable to help, somebody else will chime in. Now, that's going to wrap things up for today. So until next time, thank you for watching, stay tuned, and have a great rest of your day.